The day I caught my husband stealing from me started like any other Tuesday. I was reviewing quarterly reports in my office when my accountant's face appeared in my doorway, pale as printer paper. My name is Zoe, and in that moment, I was still living what I thought was my perfect life. Successful business owner at 32, married to my college sweetheart, with a supportive family who'd always had my back. 5 minutes later, that life shattered into a million pieces. "There's something you need to see," Marcus said, placing a stack of documents on my desk. His hands were shaking. "I've triple-checked everything. The numbers don't lie." I remember staring at those papers, my coffee growing cold beside me. Nearly $2 million, systematically drained from my company accounts over the past year. All traces led back to one person, my husband, Kylan. "This can't be right," I whispered, but Marcus just shook his head. I called Kylan immediately, straight to voicemail. Then I called his office. His assistant's voice wavered. "Mr. McBride hasn't been in for 2 days, Mrs. McBride. He said he was working from home." I drove home like a madwoman, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. Our house was quiet when I walked in, but I heard voices from upstairs, Kylan's voice and a woman's laugh I didn't recognize. "I can't believe you pulled it off," the woman was saying. "You're brilliant, baby." I pushed open our bedroom door. Kylan was packing a suitcase, and beside him stood Jessica from marketing, the new hire he'd insisted we needed 6 months ago. "Zoe?" He didn't even have the decency to look shocked. Instead, he smiled that charming smile that had won over my parents years ago. "I was wondering when you'd figure it out." "Why?" It was all I could manage. "Because I could," he shrugged. "Your company was doing so well and you were so trusting. It was almost too easy." I called my parents, desperate for support. They arrived within the hour, but what happened next still makes my stomach turn. "Sweetheart," my mother Delilah said, placing her hand on my arm. "I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding. Kylan would never—" "I did it," Kylan interrupted, his voice smooth as honey. "But Zoe's business was built on our joint efforts. I deserved more than she was willing to give me." My father Malcolm nodded thoughtfully. "He has a point, Zoe. Marriage is about sharing. Maybe if you'd been more generous—" "Are you kidding me?" I jerked away from my mother's touch. "He stole from me. He cheated on me." Now, Kylan said, stepping forward. "Let's not be dramatic. Jessica and I have a connection that just happened naturally. These things occur in business partnerships sometimes." I watched in horror as my parents exchanged glances. They were buying it. They were actually buying his lies. "Honey," my mother said, "maybe you should consider couples counseling. Every marriage has rough patches." "Rough patches?" I laughed, the sound harsh and foreign to my own ears. "He emptied my company accounts. We're facing bankruptcy." "I'm sure Kylan has a plan," my father said firmly. "He's always been good with business strategies." I looked at them, my husband of 8 years, my parents who had raised me to be strong and independent, and saw strangers. The betrayal felt like a physical wound, stealing my breath. "Get out," I whispered. "All of you, get out of my house." "Zoe, be reasonable," Kylan started, but I cut him off. "The police are already on their way. I called them before I came home." I hadn't, but the way Kylan's face paled was worth the lie. "Get out!" He grabbed his suitcase, and Jessica scurried after him like a scared mouse. My parents lingered, their faces a mixture of disappointment and confusion. "When you've calmed down," my mother began. "Don't," I said. "Just don't." After they left, I stood in my empty house, surrounded by photos of what I'd thought was a happy life. 8 years of marriage, 15 years of building my business from nothing, all gone in a single afternoon. My phone buzzed, a text from my best friend Ariel. "Just heard. Coming over with wine and takeout. Don't you dare argue." I sank to the floor, my back against the wall, and finally let the tears come. Everything I'd built was crumbling, but somewhere beneath the pain, I felt something else stirring. Determination, rage, a promise to myself that this wouldn't be the end of my story. I didn't know it then, but that Tuesday marked the beginning of something new, something stronger, something entirely mine. 3 months after my world imploded, I sat across from Christian in his corner office, clutching a coffee cup like a lifeline. He'd been my mentor since I started my first business, and now he was the only person from my old professional life still willing to talk to me. The bankruptcy proceedings are finally over, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I've lost everything except my house and car. Christian leaned back in his chair, studying me. So what's next? Next? I laughed. I'm 32 and starting from scratch. Most of my industry contacts think I'm either stupid or complicit in what Kylan did. My own parents still think I'm overreacting. That's not what I asked. He stood up and walked to his whiteboard. What's next, Zoe? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Another text from my mother. Kylan asked about you today. He seems really sorry. Maybe if you just talked. I deleted the message without finishing it. I want to start over, I said finally. Something completely different from my last company. Something that can't be stolen. Christian picked up a marker. Tell me more. For the next hour, we brainstormed. My previous business had been in traditional retail. This time I wanted to go digital, a platform connecting independent artisans with buyers. Something Kylan wouldn't understand enough to manipulate. It's risky, Christian said, capping his marker. But you've got the experience, and more importantly, you've got nothing left to lose. Except my sanity, I muttered. Your sanity left the building when you married that snake. Ariel's voice came from the doorway. She worked in the same building and had a habit of appearing exactly when I needed her. But I've got something that might help. She dropped a stack of papers on Christian's desk. Remember that web developer you wanted to hire last year? He's freelancing now, and he owes me a favor. Ariel, I can't afford... He'll work for equity, she interrupted. He's seen what you can do, and he believes in second chances. That night, I sat in my empty house. I'd sold most of the furniture to pay legal fees, with my laptop balanced on a cardboard box. Ariel sprawled on the floor beside me, ordering takeout while I worked on a business plan. Your ex-sister-in-law called me today, she said casually. I stopped typing. Pearl? She wants to meet. Says she has information about where some of your money went. My hands started shaking. I can't think about that right now. You can't, or you won't. I need to focus on moving forward, I said firmly. The past is just quicksand. Ariel sat up, her face serious. Sometimes you need to understand the past to avoid repeating it. Before I could respond, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find my father standing there, looking uncomfortable. Your mother's worried about you, he said. Is she? Or is she worried about Kylan? He shifted his weight. He's having a hard time finding work. His reputation... Stop. I held up my hand. Just stop. Do you know what my reputation is like right now? Do you even care? Of course we care. We're your parents. Then where were you when I needed you? My voice cracked. Where were you when I was selling everything I owned to pay off the debts he created? We thought you were being hasty. Marriages take work. Get out. The words were quiet but firm. Come back when you're ready to be my father instead of his advocate. After he left, Ariel helped me get back to work. We stayed up until 3 a.m., fueled by coffee and determination, building the framework for my new future. The next morning, I met with Christian's contact, a startup investor who specialized in women-owned businesses. Your previous company's failure concerns me, she said bluntly. It should, I replied. But I've learned more from that failure than from all my previous successes combined. I know exactly what to watch for now, and more importantly, I know what I'm capable of surviving. She studied me for a long moment, then smiled. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. Let's talk numbers. Walking out of that meeting with initial funding secured, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. My phone buzzed with another message from Pearl, and this time I didn't delete it. Maybe Ariel was right. Maybe understanding the past was part of building the future. But first, I had a company to build, and this time I would do it on my own terms. 6 months into building my new company, I finally agreed to meet Pearl at a quiet cafe across town. She was already there when I arrived, nervously shredding a paper napkin. "You look good," she said, standing to hug me. I let her, surprised by how much I'd missed her. "Really good, actually." "Amazing what ditching a toxic husband can do for your complexion," I said, sliding into my seat. "You wanted to talk?" Pearl glanced around before pulling out a USB drive. "I found this in Kylan's old laptop. He gave it to me to fix last year, but I never returned it. There's a lot here, Zoe. Details about where he moved the money, records of conversations with his accomplices." My hands trembled as I reached for the drive. "Why are you giving me this now?" "Because my brother is a monster," she said simply. "And because I saw your parents at church last Sunday, still defending him. Someone needs to know the truth." The waitress brought our coffees, and Pearl waited until she left before continuing. "He's been staying with them, you know. Your parents." I nearly choked on my drink. "What?" "For the past month. He sold them some story about wanting to make amends, needing support while he gets back on his feet." She looked disgusted. "They're actually lending him money." My phone buzzed, a message from my lead developer about our latest platform update. The contrast between my old life and new one felt surreal. "I have to show you something," I said, pulling out my tablet. I opened our beta site, watching Pearl's eyes widen as she scrolled through it. "This is incredible," she whispered. "How long have you been working on this?" "Since the divorce. It launches next month." I took a deep breath. "Pearl, thank you for the drive, but I don't think I need it anymore. I'm building something new, something better." "But don't you want justice? This could help you recover some of what he stole." The cafe door chimed, and my mother walked in. She froze when she saw us, then marched over to our table. "Pearl, what are you doing here?" Her voice was sharp. "Does Kylan know you're meeting with her?" "I'm 32 years old, Mom," I said, standing up. "I don't need anyone's permission to have coffee with a friend." "Friend?" She laughed bitterly. "She's his sister. She's probably spying for him." Pearl stood too, her face flushed. "Actually, Delilah, I'm here because someone needs to tell Zoe the truth about what's happening, about how you and Malcolm are enabling him." "We are helping a man who made a mistake," my mother's voice rose, drawing attention from other customers. "Which is more than I can say for my own daughter, who abandoned her marriage at the first sign of trouble." I grabbed my purse, suddenly calm. "The first sign of trouble wasn't him stealing my money, Mom. It was you and Dad choosing him over me. And you're still doing it." Back at my office, Ariel found me buried in code reviews. "Your mom called me," she said, perching on my desk. "She's worried about you consorting with traitors now." I laughed despite myself. Pearl gave me evidence of Kylan's crimes. I left it at the cafe. "You what?" Ariel stared at me. "Why?" "Because I don't need it." I turned my screen toward her, showing our pre-launch metrics. "Look at these numbers, Ariel. We haven't even launched yet, and we already have a waiting list of artisans wanting to join the platform." She studied the data, then me. "You're really doing this, aren't you? Building something bigger than before." "Without any help from family," I nodded. "Without borrowing money or favors. Just hard work and good people who believe in the project." My phone buzzed again. Christian asking about our investor meeting tomorrow. As I replied, Pearl's message came through. "I understand why you left the drive, but I'm keeping it safe just in case. Some truths need to be preserved." I smiled, remembering how scared I'd been just months ago. Now, surrounded by screens showing the framework of my new company, that fear felt distant. My parents might still be blind to Kylan's true nature, but I wasn't that person anymore, the one who needed their approval or understanding. "Want to grab dinner?" Ariel asked. "We should celebrate the pre-launch numbers." "Actually," I said, "I need to finish these reviews. The platform goes live in 3 weeks, and it has to be perfect." She grinned. "That's my girl. Living well really is the best revenge, isn't it?" Looking at my growing company, I had to agree. Success wasn't just about proving others wrong anymore. It was about proving myself right. The day my platform hit 1 million in sales, Pearl called me with news about Kylan. I was in my new office, surrounded by the happy chaos of success. Developers celebrating, phones ringing, the the constant ping of new artisan signups. He's falling apart, Pearl said without preamble. Jessica left him last week. Apparently, he tried the same scam with her family's business. I leaned back in my chair, watching my team through the glass walls. Why are you telling me this? Because your parents are still supporting him, and they're running out of money. He's bleeding them dry, Zoe. Before I could respond, Ariel burst into my office waving her tablet. We just got featured in Tech Weekly. They're calling us the future of artisan commerce. I gestured for her to wait. Pearl, I appreciate the update, but he's asking about you, she interrupted. Wanting to know how you managed to bounce back. I think he's planning something. The celebration outside suddenly felt distant. What do you mean? He's been making calls asking about your new company structure. Please tell me you've protected yourself this time. Every investor, employee, and partner is thoroughly vetted, I assured her. He can't touch this one. After hanging up, I filled Ariel in. She frowned, then pulled out her phone and dialed. Christian? Yeah, she just heard. Can you come over? Bring the legal team. An hour later, my office was filled with lawyers instead of celebrations. Christian paced as they reviewed our security measures. Your corporate structure is solid, our head lawyer confirmed. But we should prepare for potential social engineering attempts. He might try to manipulate employees or artisans. Already handled, I said, pulling up our security protocols. Every financial transaction requires triple authentication. No single person has complete access to any system. Christian stopped pacing. You learned well. I had good teachers. I smiled at him and Ariel. And expensive lessons. My phone buzzed. A text from my father. Your mother and I need to talk to you. It's important. Speaking of expensive lessons, I muttered, showing the message to Ariel. Don't go alone, she warned. That evening, I met my parents at their house. The place looked different, shabbier, with a desperate energy I'd never felt there before. Kylan's expensive car sat in the driveway. He's not here, my mother said quickly as she opened the door. He's at a job interview. Sure he is. I stepped inside, noting the empty liquor bottles in the recycling bin. What's so important? My father looked older than I remembered, his shoulders hunched. We need help, Zoe. We've made some mistakes. You mean like giving Kylan your retirement savings? I kept my voice neutral. Or remortgaging the house to fund his business ventures? They exchanged shocked looks. How did you? Pearl told me everything. She's been watching him destroy your lives like he tried to destroy mine. We thought we were helping him, my mother whispered. He seemed so sincere about changing. Like he seemed sincere about loving me? The words came out sharper than intended. About building a life together? About... A key turned in the lock. Kylan walked in, stopping short when he saw me. Well? He smiled that familiar, charming smile, now somewhat frayed at the edges. Isn't this a lovely reunion? I was just leaving. I stood up. I saw the article about your new company, he said quickly. Very impressive. Maybe we could talk, for old time's sake? I looked at him, really looked at him. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his eyes had a desperate gleam, and his hands shook slightly. Karma had finally caught up with him. There's nothing to talk about, I said. Mom, Dad, when you're ready to have a conversation without him involved, call me. Until then... Zoe, please, my mother reached for my arm. We need your help. Just a small loan to tide us over. No. The word came out firm and clear. I won't fund his next scam. I won't watch him destroy you like he tried to destroy me. You heartless bitch, Kylan snarled, his charm evaporating. After everything we built together. Everything I built, I corrected him. Everything you stole. And now you want to steal from them too? I walked to the door, then turned back. Mom, Dad, when you're ready to cut him loose, I'll help you rebuild, but not before then. Driving away, I called Pearl. You were right, he's getting desperate. Be careful, she warned. Desperate people do desperate things. But as I headed back to my office, where my team was still celebrating our success, I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. I'd rebuilt my life from nothing once, I could handle whatever came next. My phone buzzed with another message from the Tech Weekly reporter requesting a follow-up interview. I smiled. Living well really was the best revenge. I was in the middle of a board meeting when security called. "Ms. Townsend, there's someone insisting on seeing you. Says he's your husband." The investors around the table pretended not to listen as I replied, "Ex-husband, and he's not allowed in the building." "He's causing a scene in the lobby," the guard said apologetically. "Should I call the police?" I looked at Christian, who nodded slightly. "Give me 5 minutes." Ending the meeting early, I took the elevator down with Ariel and Christian flanking me. The scene in the lobby was exactly what I'd expected. Kylan, his suit even more rumpled than last week, gesturing wildly at the security guards. "There she is," he called out, his voice echoing. "My brilliant wife." "Ex-wife," I corrected, keeping my distance. "What do you want, Kylan? Can't a man congratulate his wife on her success? I saw your company valuation. Very impressive." He stepped forward, that old charming smile plastered on his face. "We should talk about reconciliation. I've changed, Zoe. I've learned my lesson." "Sir," one of the guards moved between us, "please step back. Your parents miss you," Kylan continued, his voice taking on a desperate edge. "They're struggling, Zoe. They need their daughter." "They need to stop enabling you," I replied. "Now leave before I call the police." His facade cracked. "You think you're so much better than me now? I made you. Everything you knew about business, you learned from me." "Everything I knew about business nearly destroyed me," I said calmly. "Everything I know now, I learned from surviving you." He lunged forward suddenly, but the guards were faster. As they restrained him, my phone rang. My mother. "Not now," I muttered, declining the call. "Your parents are being evicted," Kylan shouted as the guards dragged him toward the door. "They'll be homeless because of your selfishness." The lobby had gone silent, employees and visitors staring. I felt Ariel's hand on my shoulder. "Is that true?" she whispered. "Probably," I admitted. "He's been living with them for months, spending their money." My phone buzzed again. This time, Pearl. "Emergency. Parents' house. Come now." 20 minutes later, I pulled up to my childhood home to find Pearl waiting outside. The front lawn was littered with boxes and furniture. "They're really being evicted," she said quietly. "The bank's here now." Inside, I found my parents sitting at their kitchen table, looking shell-shocked. A bank representative stood nearby, uncomfortably shuffling papers. "How much?" I asked him. He named a figure that made my stomach clench. "They have until tomorrow to vacate." "Zoe," my mother started crying, "we're so sorry. We should have listened. Not now." I cut her off, pulling out my phone. "Christian, remember that real estate investment we discussed? I need to move on it now." 2 hours later, I owned my childhood home. The bank representative left with a certified check, and my parents sat in their kitchen, now technically my kitchen, looking lost. "Where's Kylan?" I asked Pearl. "Gone. He cleared out their accounts yesterday and disappeared." My father put his head in his hands. "We were such fools." "Yes," I agreed. "You were. And now we need to talk about conditions." They looked up sharply. "Conditions?" my mother asked. "If you want to stay here, there will be rules. First, if Kylan shows up, you call the police. Second, you both start financial counseling. Third, you get jobs, any jobs, to pay rent." "Rent?" My mother looked scandalized. "We're your parents." "And I'm your daughter, the one you chose not to believe, the one you abandoned for a con man." My voice cracked slightly. "Those are my terms." My father reached for my mother's hand. "We'll do it. Whatever you say, we'll do it." "There's more," I continued. "You need to understand what really happened. Pearl?" She pulled out the USB drive, the one I'd left behind months ago. "Everything's here. All his schemes, all his lies. You need to see who you've been protecting." My phone buzzed yet again, Ariel checking on me. I texted back quickly, "Handling it. Start the restraining order paperwork." Looking at my parents, their world shattered just like mine had been, I felt an odd mix of satisfaction and sadness. This wasn't the revenge I'd wanted, but maybe it was the wake-up call they needed. "I have to get back to work," I said, standing. "Pearl will help you start sorting things out. Remember, If he shows up, call the police. No exceptions. Walking out of my childhood home, now an investment property in my portfolio, I realized something important. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just living well. It's being strong enough to set boundaries with the people who hurt you, even when they're family. A month after buying my parents' house, I sat across from them in their new financial counselor's office. My mother had found work as a receptionist, and my father had swallowed his pride to take a job at a hardware store. They looked tired but different, humbled maybe. Your parents have made significant progress, the counselor said, reviewing their budget. But there's something they need to tell you. My mother pulled out an envelope with trembling hands. This came yesterday. Inside was a letter from Kylan, postmarked from another state. I scanned it quickly, my jaw clenching. He's asking for more money, I said flatly. Claims he's starting a new business venture and wants investors. We didn't respond, my father said quickly. We promised we wouldn't. But, I could hear it in his voice. But he's been calling other family members, my mother admitted. Your Aunt Susan already gave him $10,000. Before I could respond, my phone rang. Pearl. He's back, she said without preamble. He's at your office. I stood up. Did security? They called the police, but he left before they arrived. Zoe, he's saying he owns part of your company. Claims he helped develop the initial concept. That's impossible, I snapped. Every idea, every line of code. I know, she interrupted, but he's talking to reporters. One of them called me for comment. I ended the call and turned to my parents. I have to go. Remember our agreement. No contact with him. None. We know, my father said softly. We've learned our lesson. At my office, I found Ariel and Christian waiting with our legal team. A local news van was parked outside. He's given interviews to 3 different outlets, our PR director reported. Claims he's the real genius behind the platform's success. Show them, Christian said. I nodded, pulling up files on the conference room screen. Every version of the platform's code, from first draft to current release. Every business plan, every investor meeting, every single document, all dated and verified. Nothing from before my divorce exists in this company. That's not what he's claiming, Ariel said, playing a clip on her phone. Kylan's face filled the screen, perfectly composed for the camera. I developed the core concept while we were married. She took my ideas and built this company without giving me credit. I just want what's fair. Send it all to the media, I decided. Every document, every verification, full transparency. Are you sure? Christian asked. That's our competitive advantage. Our advantage is our execution, not our idea, I said. Let them see everything. Let them see who really built this. The next few hours were a blur of reporters, lawyers, and documentation. By evening, most major tech sites were running stories about Kylan's false claims, complete with evidence of my solo development of the platform. Then Pearl called again. He's at your parents' house. I found him on the front lawn, screaming at my father through the closed door. 2 police cars were already pulling up. You're violating a restraining order, I called out. He spun around, his composure completely gone. You think you're so clever? You think you can just take everything? Take everything? I laughed. You stole my money, my business, and my family's trust. I built this new company from nothing, while you were busy spending their retirement funds. I made you who you are, he shouted as the police approached. No, I said quietly. You showed me who I am. Someone who can survive you, someone who can rebuild, someone stronger than you ever imagined. As the police led him away, my parents emerged from the house. My mother was crying again, but this time it was different. We watched the news, she said. Saw the evidence you released, all those late nights you spent working, all those ideas you talked about. We should have known, should have believed in you. Yes, I agreed. You should have. Can you ever forgive us? My father asked. I looked at them, really looked at them. They were trying, following my rules, working their new jobs, attending counseling. It wasn't enough, not yet, but it was something. I don't know, I answered honestly, but you're doing the work now. That matters. My phone buzzed with a message from Ariel. Tech Weekly wants to do a follow-up story, something about rising from the ashes of betrayal. You in? I texted back. Set it up. Looking at my parents, watching Kylan being driven away in a police car, I felt strangely peaceful. This wasn't the end I'd expected when my world fell apart 2 years ago. It was better, stronger. I have to get back to work, I told my parents. Keep following the rules, keep doing the work. That's all I can ask for now. Walking to my car, I realized that sometimes confronting your past isn't about revenge at all. Sometimes it's about standing your ground and showing everyone, including yourself, exactly what you're made of. The morning after Kylan's arrest, I walked into my office to find Ariel waiting with the Tech Weekly reporter. The headline on her tablet read, "Tech's Rising Phoenix, the woman who rebuilt her empire." "Ready for this?" Ariel asked. "1 second." I checked my phone, a message from Pearl. "He's being held without bail, multiple charges of fraud, including what he did to Aunt Susan." The reporter, Sarah, set up her recorder. "Your ex-husband's claims about owning part of your company have been thoroughly debunked. But there's more to this story, isn't there?" "There always is," I said, sitting down. "But let's talk about the future, not the past." "Actually," she leaned forward, "I'd like to talk about both. Your platform just hit 2 million users. You've revolutionized how artisans connect with buyers. But you built this from the ashes of another company, one your ex-husband destroyed." My office door opened, and Christian walked in with my parents. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, "but they insisted on being here." My mother stepped forward, clutching her purse. "We need to make something right." "Mom, I'm in the middle of—" "Please," my father said, "this can't wait." Sarah turned off her recorder, but I could see the journalist in her eyes light up. My mother pulled out a familiar USB drive, the one Pearl had given me months ago. "We watched everything on this last night. All of it. The videos of him planning the theft, the emails to his accomplices, the offshore accounts." "Where did you get that?" I asked quietly. "Pearl gave it to us after his arrest," my father answered. "Said we needed to see who we'd been protecting." He turned to Sarah. "Are you recording this?" She quickly reactivated her recorder. "My name is Malcolm, and I'm Zoe's father. For 2 years, I chose to believe a con man over my own daughter. I watched her rebuild her life while I funded her abuser. I need to publicly apologize." My mother wiped her eyes. "We both do. We've given statements to the police about everything we knew, everything we enabled." Sarah was typing furiously on her tablet. "Mr. Malcolm, are you saying you have evidence of additional crimes?" "We have evidence of everything," he said firmly, "and we're done protecting him." My phone buzzed. A text from Pearl. "More victims coming forward. Police want to talk to you about pattern recognition." "Zoe," Sarah turned back to me, "how does this change things?" I looked at my parents, seeing the genuine remorse in their eyes, then at Christian and Ariel, who'd stood by me through everything. "It doesn't," I said finally. "My company's success isn't about him or what he did. It's about what I built after he tried to destroy me." "But surely the evidence—" "The evidence is for the police," I interrupted. "My focus is on the future. We're launching a new feature next month that will revolutionize how small creators access global markets." My father stepped forward. "That's my daughter, always looking forward. I just wish I'd seen her strength sooner." Sarah's phone pinged. "Breaking news. Police are investigating a potential fraud ring. Your ex-husband appears to have scammed multiple families." "No comment on ongoing investigations," Ariel jumped in smoothly. "But we'd love to tell you about our new market expansion plans." After the interview, my parents lingered. My mother reached for my hand. "We're selling the house," she said. "The one you bought for us. We found a smaller place we can afford on our new salaries." "Mom, you don't have to." "Yes, we do," my father interrupted. "We need to stand on our own feet, like you did." My phone buzzed again, this time with a notification that would change everything. Major international retailer interested in acquisition talks. "I have to take this," I said, showing Ariel the message. "Go," my mother smiled. "We'll talk later. We've got time now." As they left, Christian stayed behind. You know what this acquisition offer means? I nodded. It means he failed. Everything he tried to destroy is worth 10 times more than what he stole. No, Christian corrected. It means you won, not by fighting him, not by exposing him, but by building something he couldn't touch. Sarah poked her head back in. One last question. What would you say to other women facing similar betrayals? I thought about the past 2 years. The pain, the rebuilding, the triumph. I'd tell them that rock bottom is actually solid ground. You can build anything on it as long as you're building for yourself. Looking out my office window at the city below, I realized that the best revenge wasn't just living well or setting boundaries. It was becoming someone so far beyond your abuser's reach that their actions become nothing more than a footnote in your success story. The acquisition papers sat unsigned on my desk while I watched the news coverage of Kylan's sentencing on my office TV. 8 years for fraud and embezzlement. The reporters outside the courthouse swarmed Pearl as she left the building. Ms. McBride, how do you feel about testifying against your own brother? Pearl's response was clear and firm. Family doesn't excuse crime. Sometimes love means holding people accountable. My phone buzzed. Ariel. Turn to Channel 7. Your parents are about to speak. I switched channels to see my father at the courthouse podium, my mother beside him. We enabled his crimes, my father said, his voice steady. We chose his lies over our daughter's truth. That choice cost us nearly everything, but it taught us what real strength looks like. A knock at my door interrupted the broadcast. Christian entered with the acquisition team. They need an answer today, he said quietly. I gestured to the TV. Give me a minute. My mother had taken the podium. To other parents out there, believe your children, stand by them. We almost lost our daughter forever because we failed to do that. We're still rebuilding her trust, one day at a time. I turned off the TV and faced the acquisition team. The offer is generous. But, the lead negotiator prompted, but I built this company to help independent artists thrive, to give people control over their own success. Selling to a major retailer feels like giving up control? Ariel appeared in the doorway. Like letting someone else have power over what you've built? I nodded. Then don't sell, Christian said simply. We can find other ways to grow. My phone lit up with a text from Pearl. He's being transferred to federal prison tomorrow. It's really over. Looking at the unsigned papers, I made my decision. No sale, but I have a counter-proposal. The lead negotiator raised an eyebrow. We're listening. Instead of buying us, partner with us. We keep our independence, you get access to our artisan network, and together we create something bigger than either of us could alone. That's not what we came here for, he said slowly. No, I smiled. It's better. Give me 30 minutes to show you why. 3 hours later, I had a partnership agreement instead of an acquisition offer. As the team left, my parents arrived for our weekly dinner, part of our ongoing reconciliation process. We saw you didn't sell, my father said, holding up his phone with the breaking news alert. I learned something from everything that happened, I replied, gathering my things. The moment you give someone power over what you've built is the moment you risk losing it all. We're proud of you, my mother said softly. Not just for your success, but for who you've become, despite our mistakes. At dinner, Pearl joined us, a new tradition we'd started. She slid into her seat with a grin. The FBI just called. They found more victims, more schemes. They're adding charges. I don't want to know, I said, opening my menu. That chapter's closed. Fair enough. Pearl raised her water glass. To new chapters? My phone buzzed one last time, a message from one of our artisans. Just hit 100K in sales through your platform. You changed my life. I showed the message to everyone at the table. This, I said, this is what matters now. Not revenge, not justice, not even healing. Though those things happen too. What matters is building something that helps others build their own dreams. Speaking of building, my father cleared his throat. Your mother and I made our first mortgage payment today, on our own. And I got a promotion at the hardware store, he added proudly. Assistant manager. Ariel arrived late, waving a tablet. Sorry, but you need to see this. We just hit 3 million users. Looking around the table, at my parents working to rebuild my trust, at Pearl who chose truth over family ties, at Ariel who never left my side, at Christian who believed in me when I barely believed in myself, I realized something profound. Success isn't just about proving people wrong. It's about proving yourself right. It's about building something so meaningful that the people who tried to break you become irrelevant to your story. To 3 million users, I raised my glass. And to the family we choose, the boundaries we set, and the dreams we build, on our own terms. To independence, Pearl added. To second chances, my mother whispered. To the future, Ariel grinned. No, I corrected them all. To right now, because right now is pretty damn perfect. And it was. Not because of revenge or karma or justice, but because I'd built something true, something mine, something that could never be stolen or destroyed. I'd built myself,